Well, it's starting to look like the Orlando Apollos are unstoppable, and I don't know how you can argue it. The Apollos went in their toughest matchup of the season against the Birmingham Iron, the number one defense in the Alliance, a team that gives up an average of 8.3 points per game to its opponents and had only given up 33 points in total after the first 4 weeks. It was said to be the Apollos' toughest opponent to date, but the Apollos sure didn't want it to look like that. The Orlando Apollos defeated the Iron 31-14, completing one of their most impressive and all-around great performances to date. Hello again, Apollos fans, and thank you for tuning into Episode 3 of the Take Aim Podcast, the official podcast of the Orlando Apollos, coming to you from iHeart Studios in Orlando, Florida. I am your host, Sean Green, and as always, sitting across from me is our Apollos team reporter, Tom Alexander. Tom, what a game. Just give me your first thoughts on Saturday's game in Alabama.
I think you're correct. It's probably the most complete performance the team has had so far. Defensively, offensively, both units shined. The Apollos were pretty balanced on offense. They ran the ball as well as they passed the ball. Had the team's first 100-yard rusher in franchise history in Davion Smith this weekend. Reeser had a pick six, which is always a good indicator that the Apollos are going to win. They're 2-0 when he has a pick six now.
Yeah, balling out.
Yeah, he certainly is, and it drove Luis Perez, the Irons quarterback, out of the game and forced them to replace him. I don't know exactly how you could have wanted it to go any better, but of course Coach Spurrier says there's still things they need to improve on.
Okay.
Yeah, I spoke with him earlier today, and he said, we have to get better every week. And if they don't focus on getting better each and every week, then they're going to falter and not have a shot at the championship. So he's basically saying, let's not talk about the record. Let's just work on what we can work on. He was right. I mean, he mentioned today. The team dropped 3 interceptions that they could have had. There were some penalties on defense that extended drives for the Iron. Seemed like every time the pass rush got into the backfield, the Irons quarterback was able to step up and either get some more time or use his legs to extend a play. And those are things that the team has struggled with this season, especially containing the quarterback in the pocket. When Keith Price came in the game for the Iron, he was able to make some plays with his legs, and that was something that happened against San Antonio. It happened against Memphis. So it's definitely an issue for the team, and we also talked about finding somebody who can catch punts consistently.
Yeah, we need Bracey Williams back hopefully in a couple weeks.
Even he muffed one in that first game.
Yeah, I know. That's been the biggest issue over the past couple weeks that we've seen.
Yeah, I mean the team's committed 3 turnovers the whole season. 2 of them are on muffed punts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first question I do want to ask you is about Coach Spurrier, because the first couple weeks he'd say, we're not the best team in the Alliance. We can't, if we come into a week and we don't play very well, we're not going to beat anybody. So after this week, you have people leaving on NFL Network saying, we thought the Iron were going to go out there and beat the Apollos with that good defense. Does Spurrier now kind of believe, listen, we've got a really solid team here, and we just need to stay grounded to get to that championship game?
I would say it's yes and no. Number one, he recognizes the talent that is on this team. I mean, it's top to bottom. It's probably the deepest roster in the Alliance in terms of talent. He recognizes that they have a chance to do something very special this season. However, he also recognizes that a couple of these wins could have easily gone the other way. The Memphis game was a close one. They were behind in San Antonio, and they had some things go their way. Logan Woodside threw that late pick to Reeser, that pick six to Reeser late in that game that helped the Apollos change momentum. Zach Mettenberger gets an extra drive in the Memphis game, and who knows what happens in that game. Salt Lake was a similar thing. They only won by 9 points. So if Salt Lake puts together a decent drive, or Brandon Oliver doesn't get hurt and stays in the game, no telling what could have happened. So he says anything can happen, and he's not wrong there. It's I think the level of talent that's spread out through the Alliance is probably a lot closer than it looks on its surface when you just look at the standings.
Well, yeah, especially if you do look at the standings, because besides the Apollos being 5-0, every other team is 2-3, 3-2, 1-4. So the Alliance, you can just tell by the standings how deep the teams are just based off of any week you go in. You can take a loss, or you can go get a win and improve yourself further in the season. But let's start talking about the game. The Apollos, like you said, best overall performance of the season. The quarterback switch for the Iron. Mm-hmm. Now, the bold prediction show we had last week, I said, Garrett Gilbert, Luis Perez, of course, we both said Garrett Gilbert would throw more yards, but Luis Perez only threw for 7 yards.
Yeah.
So when you got Keith Reeser picking him off to go up 14-0, then the Iron went to their bench and put in Keith Price. And Perez was said to be a top 3 quarterback in the league. So many were surprised that the Iron made the switch so quick. How were the Apollo's defense able to shut down the Iron? And were you surprised that they made the switch so quick into the game?
Yeah, I don't think anyone except Iron head coach Tim Lewis was unsurprised by that move. He said after the game that Price had worked with the first team that week in practice leading up to the game, so it was something that was in the back of his mind that they may do during the game against the Apollos, but he did it in the first half. Perez made that mistake, and that was it. If you look deeper at the numbers heading into that game, the Iron maybe have been a paper tiger a little bit. They were 3-1 going into that game. They lost to San Antonio, who's very good, but they had played Atlanta. They shut out Memphis in week 1, and that was a pre-Zach Mettenberger Memphis Express team. That was Hackenberg quarterbacking that team. They're a different team with Hackenberg at quarterback. They had beaten Atlanta. They beat Salt Lake, but Salt Lake was ahead in that game, and Salt Lake made some mistakes to end up losing that game. It wasn't as if the Iron dominated Salt Lake. So they also had a middle-of-the-road rushing attack. And Perez was the second passer in the Alliance in terms of yardage, but he was about 300 yards behind Garrett Gilbert. They had no passing touchdowns coming into that game. Price got them there first.
The first one, yeah.
So when you look at it a little more deeply like that, you could see it's a team that found ways to win games, but they were flawed. They were banged up all along the offensive line, and they lost 2 more offensive linemen during the game. So when you start doing that and you have to plug in backups and mix and match, guys are playing out of position on the O-line, that leads to the Apollos getting 5 sacks, which they haven't had all year. That's their most in a game this year. It leads to interceptions. It leads to a lot of different things. So, the Iron, I think, learned a lot from this game, and the league learned a lot about the Iron, for sure. The rest of the Eastern Conference, I think, is probably a lot closer than everyone thought.
Well, especially with Atlanta making the switch of quarterback to Aaron Murray, that causes a lot of stir in the East, especially because the Atlanta Legends are playing a lot better these past couple games, beating Memphis. So they could be a team potentially down the road if Birmingham doesn't play as well. They could be a team potentially to take that second spot or jump up to play in the championship later in the year with Murray playing so well.
Yeah.
But the running attack. Obviously, the 100-yard guess by me didn't go so well because one rusher went over 100 yards, Davion Smith, 119 yards on about 14 attempts. Again, it's another week where you don't know who's going to get the most carries. You go into the game thinking it's D'Ernest, and Davion just takes over. What made it so easy for the Apollos rushers, especially Davion, to just run all over that defense?
The offensive line had its best game of the year. They allowed 0 sacks on Gilbert. He wasn't hurried very often.
Which has been very rare this year.
Yeah, they haven't had a 0-sack game all season. He wasn't hurried very much at all, like I said, and they were blowing open holes. It's also when you force a defense to have to respect the passing game. I mean, the Iron had the best passing defense in the league going into that game. The rushing defense was in the middle. So when you look at it like that, they haven't been as good against the run this year. So they kind of figured, all right, well, we'll force them to beat us with the run. And the Apollos did that. They beat them on the ground. Davion had a huge day. And then that forces the secondary to creep up, and Gilbert can make plays over the top. And that's kind of how it went. But Davion's a very powerful runner. He breaks arm tackles. He can catch the ball. He looked like a man possessed in that game. I mean, he had had an extra gear, it seemed like, that week.
No, and the funny thing is, you say like the secondary, they move up to try to stop that run because when you got a guy that's just running all over, you need to try and counteract that. But the week before against San Antonio, right? You got Kenneth Farrow that runs for 140 yards.
Exactly.
The passing game, though, he only had 106 yards passing in that game.
Woodside for San Antonio.
Yeah. So the cool thing is Garrett Gilbert goes for 286 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and a QB rating of 101.9. So Garrett Gilbert, as much as like the running game did well, the passing game did just as well,
Absolutely.
Which is surprising for that defense. So how do you think Garrett threw so well against a defense that honestly did not give up many yards to quarterbacks this year.
Part of it is he throws a very catchable ball. Coach Spurrier has been saying it all year. He has this God-given talent to throw a very pretty, tight spiral catchable ball. He has good instincts in the pocket, so he's able to get rid of it when other guys might pull it down and take a sack. And that puts you in better field position. He made some throws that were in really tight windows. I mean, there were a couple, one or two maybe, that could have been intercepted by Birmingham that they dropped, which would have been his first interceptions of the year. But he's talented enough to fit the ball into those tight windows against that defense. And the receiving core for the Apollos is really deep. They're talented and they're fast. So if the offensive line can stay on its blocks, give Garrett an extra second or two to get around in the pocket, and the receivers stay with the play and stay alive, like Garrett always says, guys get open, and he found those guys. And to be honest, when you have a guy that can throw a fade route like he threw Charles Johnson, I honestly don't know how you stop that. I mean,
it's pretty hard.
Charles was covered on that play.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't think he was going to catch that
And that was like the third time they were going for him in the end zone.
Right.
So he's being looked at as a target there every single time.
I mean, he's the leading receiver in the league, so he's always going to be bracketed or double teamed or whatever. They're going to have their best guy on him, and to be honest, from the press box, I didn't think he was going to catch that ball. I thought it's batted down, maybe it's intercepted, whatever, and Garrett put it in the best possible place he could have put it. Charles made a really good play on it. When you've got guys like that, you've always got a chance, and sometimes you make really good defenses not look so good.
I was looking at the 2-point plays, right? And Charles Johnson, they go for the first 2-point conversion. It's that little in-cut route where he threw it to him, didn't get it. Next time they go score a touchdown, they do the same play, and they get it.
Yeah.
So obviously Charles Johnson is the target every time, and Spurrier probably thought, hey, this play's going to work. We're just going to keep trying it.
Yeah, well, Charles came really close on that first 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
From the press box, I thought maybe he had it. It was borderline.
It was close, yeah.
It was really close. So I guess he figured, we'll be able to get it.
Try it again. Well, now the Apollos are heading back home at Spectrum Stadium to play the Arizona Hotshots. But don't let the Hotshots record deceive you, though. The Hotshots started out 2-0 and was said at the time to be the number one team in the league. Since then, they have gone on a 3-game losing streak, but almost completed a massive comeback last week after being down 26-0 against the San Antonio Commanders and ended up coming back to lose 29-25. Tom, how dangerous are the Hotshots, especially a Hotshots team that is desperate for a victory to stay ahead of the standings or try to get back up to the top standing in the West?
Oh, they're incredibly dangerous. They run an up-tempo offense. The Apollos defense hasn't seen anything like that yet this season. It's always a challenge. It helps that the Apollos are deep talent-wise. They've got good athletes who are in good condition, so that should help them. They have the number 2 offense in the alliance behind the Apollos. John Wolford's a very good quarterback. He runs that offense very well. Coach Spurrier said earlier today, they're a very good team. They've had some turnovers in key spots in these 3 losses that have led to them, being 2-3 coming in. But we're halfway through the season. They're tied for second place out there in the West. They're still very much alive, and like you said, they're desperate for a win. And Coach Rick Neuheisel of Arizona is old friends with Coach Spurrier. They know each other pretty well. This is Birmingham was their first real test probably of the season. This is another. This is the game that's been circled on the calendar by most people watching the Alliance since week 1 is Arizona and Orlando, because coming into the season, a lot of the experts thought that those were the 2 best teams. They still might be.
Yeah, and for the Apollos fans that maybe don't watch the Hotshots or haven't seen a Hotshots game, who is a couple guys that are really dangerous and can cause problems for some of these Apollos players?
Oh, John Wolford certainly is one. Rashad Ross, their wide receiver.
One of the best wide receivers in the league.
Absolutely he is. Those 2 guys together are very good. Their backup quarterback, Trevor Knight, isn't bad either. He's very talented if he's got to come in the game. When we had the joint practice with them during training camp, they used both of those guys. They were both able to gain yards against our defense in some of the combined drills that we watched. They're both mobile. They both command this offense really well, and they're able to extend plays. So the defense is going to have to really stay on its assignments. The secondary is going to have to make plays when it needs to, and probably not drop interceptions because you're not going to get a lot of those opportunities against Arizona like you may have against the Iron. So you've got to make the most of those when they come.
So what are the 3 top keys to getting another Apollos victory?
Number one is probably going to be run the ball again. Run the ball as much as you can, control the clock, keep the ball away from Arizona. Arizona's going to gain yards against the defense. They've done it to everyone. It's just going to happen. So you've got to try and keep the ball out of their hands as much as possible. When they do have the ball, bend but don't break on defense. Force field goals. Don't allow touchdowns. Keep them out of the red zone. Things like that. Simple, very simple football things are what's going to win this game. The Apollos have to be fundamentally sound. No penalties to extend drives. This is a team that can capitalize on things like that because they have the talent to do it. They've got to stay on their assignments. The offensive line's got to open holes. They've got to buy time. Everyone has to be at the top of their game this week in order to win, I think.
All right, Tom. So for the first week of our game, Apollos bold predictions. You went 5-0.
Did I really?
Yep, you got all 5 right. I swear.
Are you serious?
I was watching the game, Tom. I was like, you know what? They got 14 points. They can't get to 20. I said they both would score 20. And then the rushing attack, at the end of the first half, we had 88 rushing yards. I'm like, wow, I really did not see. We were passing the ball, and we were running the ball. So I'm like, wow, okay. So you went 5-0. Trying to get back into it, so I came up with 5 bold predictions that I'm trying to, get right this week. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
The Apollos will score more than 25 points this week.
Yes.
I'm going to say yes. Garrett Gilbert will throw for over 225 yards.
Yes.
I'm going to say yes. The Hotshots will rush for over 120 yards.
120?
Yes, as a team.
As a team, 120? I'm going to say yes.
I'll say no.
Okay.
Okay.
You got to make up ground somewhere, man.
They have a lot of good rushers. That's the thing.
Yep.
We just got to make sure if they can stop the run, I think they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you stop at least 2 of the rushers, you kind of give yourself a good chance for that not to happen. Charles Johnson will have more receiving yards than Rashad Ross.
Yes.
I'm going to say no. I don't know. I have a weird feeling. But
okay.
Rashad Ross, he's been going off the past every single week.
Yeah.
Charles Johnson does catch, at least upwards of 80 yards per game.
He does. But the Apollos also spread the ball around a lot.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. That Ross is their guy. They don't really have a lot of depth at wide receiver.
Yeah.
And then the Apollos go 6-0.
Yes.
And I'm going to say yes.
It's going to be a nail biter, though. This is not an easy game, and you look at what they did against San Antonio. They were down 26 points at the half and came back and nearly won that game.
Well, I think it's going to be a shootout, and if it's going to be a shootout, you're going to want to be at Spectrum Stadium. Tom, as always, thank you for coming in and taking the time. Let's go 1-0 for the 6th straight week.
Let's do it.
And Apollos fans, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Take Game Podcast. If you have not yet subscribed to the Apollos YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? We are uploading new and fresh content for all you Apollos fans to enjoy. Also, make sure to follow the Apollos on Instagram and Twitter at AAF Apollos. Follow our team reporter, Tom Alexander, on Twitter at TheTomAlexander. And follow me on Twitter at SeanGreen__. Let's go 1-0 again, Apollos fans. Make sure to come out to the game this Saturday and pack Spectrum Stadium to cheer on your Orlando Apollos. #TakeAim.